Hey guys, Thanksgiving is over and we're getting back to what? Chains. Yes, Miss Mac is feeling a lot better than I was the last time I read. My voice is still a little bit scratchy and I'm still taking cough medicine and vitamin C, but of course, I'm just slaying. Anyway, we're going to look at chapter 25. That's XX5. And chapter 25 starts on page 153, 54, like 155. It's part 2 of the book. But before we start reading chapter 25, I want to talk a little bit about figurative language. I want to remind you about figurative language because we're going to be looking at a very specific kind of figurative language as we read chapter 25. So go ahead and take out your resource that I gave you before we went on break. And it's a handout that has all of the different kinds of figurative language listed on it. And if you don't have that, shame on you and ask me for it tomorrow. So we talked last week about 3 types of figurative language, and we were looking at figurative language in one of the chapters that we read last week. And we looked at simile, which is a comparison of 2 things using like or as. We looked at metaphor, and we know that a metaphor compares 2 things but does not use like or as. And then we also looked at personification, and we know that personification is a technique that authors use to give objects or non-human things human qualities. So I'll give you an example of each. So a simile, if I wanted to compare my smile to the sun, I might say, my smile is as bright as the sun. So I used as, and I compared my smile to the sun, saying that I have a really bright and beautiful smile, which I do. Secondly, if I wanted to continue with that thought on comparing my smile to the sun, and I wanted to use the technique or the figurative language called metaphor, I would say, I have a sunny smile. So I still compared my smile to the sun, but I did not use like or as. I'll say that again. I have a sunny smile. I'm comparing my smile to the sun, and I'm not using like or as. Now, if I want to personify something, or if I want to give something that's not human a human quality, I might say something like, death stalked me all night. So what am I saying? Someone is getting ready to die. Death stalked me or stalked her. We know that death can't stalk anybody, so I'm personifying death, or I'm giving death the human quality of the ability to stalk. So those 3 kinds of figurative language we looked at last week. I want you to think about those and be on the lookout for those as we read chapter 25. But also, and more importantly, we're really annotating for imagery. So I'm going to read the definition of imagery. Imagery is visually descriptive language that the author uses to help the reader form pictures in their mind about the story. So it's a way or a technique that authors use that creates these pictures in your mind about what you're reading. That's imagery. Very descriptive language that authors use to create a certain picture or an image in your mind. So keep those in mind. Make sure that you have that resource in front of you, the figurative language resource. And we're going to be annotating for, first and foremost, imagery, but I'll also point out some examples of figurative language that involve metaphor, simile, or personification. So that's your job as we read chapter 25. Grab your book, grab your highlighter and your pencil. I'll give you a second to do that, or you can stop the video. Make sure that you have those 3 things, that you have your book, turn to chapter 25, and I'll show you what that looks like. It's the XXV. Make sure that you have your figurative language resource, which should be attached to your ELA folder. And make sure you have your highlighter or your pencil so that you can highlight as we go along. And by the way, there will be a quiz on chapter 25. Okay, chapter 25. Sunday, July 21st through Tuesday, August 20th, 1776. Our slaves, sir, cost us money, and we buy them to make money by their labor. If they are sick, they are not only unprofitable, but expensive. Benjamin Franklin, the Gazetter, and New Daily Advertiser. Really interesting that we've been talking about how these enslaved people, namely Isabel and Curzon, were really treated very inhumanely, were treated like pets or like objects or like things. And here we have the very famous Benjamin Franklin talking about slaves as if they were a kind of machinery. Our slaves cost us money and we buy them to make profit on their labor. Just like you buy, if you are a hairstylist, just like you buy a curling iron or a blow dryer, you spend money on those things in order to make money on how they work. And when your curling iron breaks down or your blow dryer is not working, in the same way that when slaves are sick, they are unprofitable and expensive. So that's Benjamin Franklin making that point about slavery, about people who were enslaved at that time. And I want you to think about that as we read this particular text. And at the end of the text, I'm going to ask you again, at the end of chapter 25, I'm going to ask you, why do you think Halls Anderson included that particular primary source at the beginning of chapter 25? Here we go. Melancholy held me hostage, and the bees built a hive of sadness in my soul. Ooh, pump the brakes. I forgot to tell you the number one thing that we're looking for besides figurative language in this chapter. We're really looking at and examining Isabel, thinking about her character. Now remember, when we read The Outsiders, we came up with a definition for characterization. And we know that characterization is a process of creating characters. And we know that authors use various techniques to bring a character to life. So we know that authors use dialogue, they use description, they use the conversations that other characters are having about a particular character. And all of these things give you information about a character. But what we're really looking for in chapter 25 is how Isabel changes. Okay? That's going to be your exit ticket. How does Isabel change over the course of this chapter? And how does the author use figurative language to show us that change? Okay? How does the author use figurative language, specifically imagery, to reveal how Isabel changes? So let's start again. My bad. Beginning of chapter 25. Melancholy held me hostage, and the bees built a hive of sadness in my soul. Dark honey filled me inside. Dark honey filled up inside me, drowning my thoughts and making it hard to move my eyes and hands. I worked as a puppet, trained to scrub and carry, curtsy and nod. Woo! That's a lot. Just those couple of sentences give me a very clear picture of how Isabel is feeling right now. What kind of mood is she in right now, guys? Let's do an annotation right there. I see the word sadness. I see the word dark honey filled up inside me. Now, when you're pouring honey into your tea, does it spring out and splash out like a Pepsi? No. Dark honey pours very slowly. It's really slow. It's really thick. So think about the image that the author is trying to create in your mind to show you Isabel's emotional state or how she's feeling. Let's read that again, because this is really a couple of very beautiful sentences. Melancholy held me hostage, and the bees built a hive of sadness in my soul. Dark honey filled up inside me, drowning my thoughts and making it hard to move my eyes and hands. I worked as a puppet, trained to scrub and carry, curtsy and nod. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, teammates and friends, you need to have an annotation and a gist right there, because this is the beginning of chapter 25, and we know from that that Isabel is very, very sad. So let's do some annotations. Imagery, dark honey filled up inside me. What does that image conjure up in your mind? How is she moving? She said she worked like a puppet, trained to scrub and carry, curtsy and nod. Okay? Think about a puppet, how a puppet moves. Okay, very beautiful imagery. I want you to highlight, circle, or underline dark honey filled up inside me. Let me get an annotation. Let me get a gist. And I also want you to annotate, I worked as a puppet, trained to scrub and carry, curtsy and nod. And let me see a gist in that margin for that. You also, in that very first sentence, you see the word melancholy. Circle melancholy and give me your own definition for the word melancholy. Baby, if you don't know, you better Google it. And highlight or underline sadness in my soul. So we're very clear at the start of chapter 25, the emotional state that Isabel is in. Let's keep it pushing. Madam would not look at me. When she had an order to give me, it went through Becky, even if we all stood in the same room. Now, we remember from a couple of chapters ago, when Ruth had one of her seizures, Madam decided that Ruth was evil. And as such, she didn't want Ruth or Isabel anywhere near her. So let's highlight, underline, or circle. Any order to give went through who? Went through Becky. So highlight, underline, or circle. And give me a little gist about the kind of mood that sets for Isabel. Okay? Tell the girl the hearth needs sweeping. Sal, Becky would say, please sweep the hearth. Tell the girl to fetch my fan. Sal, Becky would say, please fetch Madam's ivory fan. The library needs dusting. Tell the girl. Sal, I swept the hearth and fetched the fan. I dusted the library without looking at the books on the shelves or the horse on the wall. I preferred the chores that took me out of the kitchen, for it was there that the bees tricked me into seeing Ruth's ghost and playing on the floor, churning butter or counting out kernels of corn. When her voice whispered to me, I caught fire again from my toes to my face, and I burned slow like damp wool. Let's stop again. Halls Anderson uses really beautiful figurative language and imagery to conjure up this mood or to convey this sadness that Isabel is feeling. So babies, let's go to the kitchen. Isabel says, I preferred the chores that took me out of the kitchen, for it was there that the bees tricked me into seeing Ruth's ghost playing on the floor, churning butter, or counting out kernels of corn. Highlight, gist, or underlined, bees tricked me into seeing Ruth's ghost, and give me a gist for what you think that means. What does it mean? And why doesn't Isabel want to do any work in the kitchen, guys? Super important for the way that chapter 25 unfolds. And she said whenever she thought about Ruth. So remember, we're looking at her emotional state and her mental state. In other words, we're looking at how Isabel is feeling and what she's thinking. So right here, what is Isabel thinking about? What is on her mind? I need a gist right there. She's thinking about who? She's thinking about Ruth. And what happens to her emotionally when she thinks about Ruth? I caught fire again. From my toes to my face, I burned slow like damp wool. Ladies and gentlemen, highlight, caught fire again from my toes to my face, and I burned slow like damp wool. Babies, that ain't nothing but imagery. Okay? Halls Anderson is creating this image of her catching fire from her toes to her face. So imagine the heat, the fire slowly making its way up Isabel's body. And fire is another way of saying what? When somebody's on fire, when somebody is hot, what does it mean? Not in a hip hop kind of way. Not like she's on point. She's cool. She's what's up. She's talking about how angry she gets when she thinks about Ruth. So make sure that you have that annotated and gisted, because I'm going to be looking for that tomorrow. And something in here might be on a quiz. Okay, let's keep going. Becky watched me, careful when I turned inside myself like that. She once tried to apologize for what happened. The instant she stopped talking, I forgot what she said. Tell the girl there are bedbugs in my chamber. Tell the girl to wash the steps. Curzon came around day after day and talked to me through the boards of the fence. I did not answer him. July marched out and August sailed in on a suffocating tide. Personification alert. Highlight, underline, circle, and give me a gist. July march out. Can the month of July march? No. August sailed in. Can August sail? No. So highlight, underline, or circle that personification. Put a little P in your margin, and then give me a gist for how the month of July ended and how the month of August began. British ships continued to land at Staten Island, hundreds of them carrying thousands of soldiers armed with countless guns and bullets. We went 2 weeks without rain. There were outbreaks of camp fever, smallpox, and dysentery amongst the rebel troops. They turned King's College into a hospital to care for thousands of sick men. I prayed that Colonel Reagan was there. I prayed he would fall ill and die a terrible death for lying to me and betraying me and letting them break my body. Whenever I heard the words liberty or freedom, I wanted to spit in the dust. The air was steeped in evil during those muggy, pestilent days. Tell the girl to sweep the cellar. Okay, a lot going on here. And I sense a shift in Isabel's feelings and a shift in what Isabel is thinking about. Now remember, we opened up chapter 25 with a profound sadness and her almost just like going through the motions of cleaning and taking care of Madam like a puppet or a robot. And now I'm sensing a shift. She's moved from mad to what? Let's look at it. It all begins with the bees tricked her to seeing Ruth's ghost playing on the floor, churning butter or counting out kernels of corn. And what did that do to her? She caught fire again from her toes to her face and burned slow like damp wool. So then we come down to the bottom of the second half of page 158 and listen at what she's saying. I prayed that Colonel Reagan was there. Where? In King's College, which they had turned into what? A hospital. Yes. I prayed he would fall ill and die a terrible death for lying to me and betraying me and letting them break my body. What do you think her emotional state is now? Now she's wishing that this man was dead. Why? Because he betrayed her and let them break her body. Now you're not going to know what she means when she says break her body if you haven't read the previous chapters. That is 22, 23, and 24. So if you didn't do your November Thanksgiving break packet, you're not going to know what that means. And you might need to go back and read those chapters so you can figure it out. Because a quiz question would be, what did Isabel mean when she said they broke her body? Okay, so right now, is she sad? Don't think so. Give me a gist, highlight, underline, or circle. I prayed that Colonel Reagan was there. I prayed he would fall ill and die of a terrible death for lying to me and betraying me and letting them break my body. Highlight, underline, and circle, and give me a gist for how you think Isabel is feeling right now. What is her emotional feeling right now? And what is she thinking about? Okay, let's find some imagery. Whenever I heard the words liberty or freedom, I wanted to spit in the dust. Okay, so spit in the dust, we can all conjure up an image of someone spitting in the dust. What does that tell you about how she's feeling right now and what she's thinking about? The air was steeped in evil during these muggy, pestilent days. Tell the girl to sweep the cellar. So I need to have a gist, and that's the second part of page 158, that tells me how Isabel is now feeling and what she's thinking about. Let's go on up to page 159, top of 159. Are you with me? I hope so. When I swept it, I found the cobwebs I had saved for Ruth. I threw them into the kitchen fire along with the mouse carcasses and rotted potatoes. Tell the girl the milk has soured. 'Twas left in the sun on purpose. All right. Stop. How did the milk go sour? That's right. Isabel left the milk in the sun on purpose so it would go sour. Highlight, just or underline. Tell the girl the milk has soured. 'Twas, which is Old English for it was, left in the sun on purpose. Gist. That gives you a lot of information about how Isabel is feeling right now and what she's thinking about. Let's go back up. She saved these cobwebs for Ruth. And what does she do with them? She throws them into the kitchen fire along with the mouse carcasses and the rotten potatoes. And this little chick left the milk in the sun on purpose. Guys, I need a very serious gist right there about how Isabel is feeling and what's on her mind, her emotional state, her mental state. Your gists and your annotations should reflect that feeling. So now we've seen two feelings. We know at the beginning of chapter 25, she's extremely sad. And the only thing she can think about is Ruth and ignoring Curzon. Now we're moving into the middle of chapter 25, and she has shifted. I'm not going to tell you how she's feeling or what she's thinking, because you should have those gists on page 158 and 159. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, team and family, that's going to be a quiz question. Let's continue on page 159, guys. Second paragraph, page 159. The British finally made a move toward the end of August, rowing half their army across to Long Island in flat-bottomed boats. Becky convinced Madam to send me to market on my own again because she was afraid to go, what with battle due to break out any minute. Point I want to make here. So the city is all aflutter with excitement, and the British troops are moving in. So these little skirmishes or battles are breaking out. It's very dangerous to be in the city now because of all this going on. And what does Becky do? Becky convinces Madam to send who? The slave. So this again speaks to how slaves or how enslaved people are treated in this time. When it's dangerous, it's all good. Send Isabel. Okay, I think it's important to note that. Please highlight Becky convinced Madam to send me to market on my own because she was afraid to go. And give me a little gist right there about the inhumane treatment of enslaved people, specifically Isabel. As commanded, I purchased 2 packets of straight pins, a piece of lace, and a basket of turnip greens. The shopkeepers and other folks looked at my face and saw only the angry red scar just starting to fade at the edges. They did not see the girl hidden behind it. So now think about the images, or think about the imagery that the author used when she says, people only saw the angry scar and not the girl hidden behind it. Highlight, circle, or gist. People only saw the angry red scar. And give me a gist, another little hint as to how Isabel is feeling, what her emotional state is, and what her mental state is at this point. Ain't gonna tell you, but I'm expecting to see those gists tomorrow. Curzon approached me on Pearl Street and tried to talk. I walked away from him and carried the purchases back to Madam's house, wings abuzz in my ears. So here we have Curzon again trying to talk to her. Remember, she said before, Curzon came around day after day and talked to me through the boards of the fence. And what does she do? She ignored him. And now he's approaching her as she comes from the market. And what does she do? She walks away. I think it's important to note and remember that. Hours later, as I ate my dinner of greens and cornbread with molasses, Becky entered the kitchen with a scowl. That Curzon boy, the one with the hat, he's in front of the house again, she said. You must tell him to leave. I lifted my eyes from my plate. Why? Because Madam wants him arrested, and I don't want trouble. That's why, Becky snapped. I did not move. Really interesting, guys. Do you want his beating on your conscience? She continued. I chewed the last of the cornbread, then wiped my fingers and stood up. Tell him to stay away, she said as I set my plate in the washing up tub. Blasted fool doesn't know what's good for him. When I lifted the latch of the garden gate, Curzon appeared, mouth a-flapping. Finally, we've much to talk about. Go away, I said. He glanced up and down the empty street. Look, I'm sorry. The Colonel? I thought sure he would help. He stopped and leaned close to my face. You don't look right. Camp fever? My tongue felt the ragged edge of a broken tooth. I'm fine. He dropped his eyes to the ground. Sorry's not enough, but I am sorry about all of it. All right, hold the phone, ladies and gentlemen. Let's gist this. Because what is he sorry about? Okay, what happened to Isabel in the previous chapters? I need a gist right there. Quiz question. All right, flag it, booze. He dropped his eyes to the ground. Sorry's not enough, but I am sorry about it all. Highlight, underline, and gist. And give me, highlight, underline, and circle, and give me a little gist for just exactly what Curzon is sorry for. I picked at a splinter of wood on the gate. There was something changed about him, but I could not figure it. Many things look different since they burned me up. Not your concern, I said. 'Tis so, he said. I've asked about your sister. A sailor I know thinks she was put on a ship to Halifax. No, they sent her to Nevis. He opened his mouth but could not find the words. Go away, I said, or they'll arrest you, Madam said. Has she received any letters from Lockton? The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. You asking me to spy again? Okay, imagery or figurative language alert. The question hit me like a bucket of cold water. I would say, ladies and gentlemen, that that's a simile. So I'm telling you that it's a simile. You tell me in your gist, and I'm going to be looking for it. What is Hals Anderson trying to tell us by saying that the question hit me like a bucket of cold water? I want to see that gist. You asking me to spy again? Listen, he started. Our freedom. I did not let him continue. You are blind. They don't want us free. They just want liberty for themselves. Oh no, I understand right good, I countered. I shouldn't have believed your rebel lies. I should have taken Ruth and run the night we landed. Even if we drowned, we would have been together. He reached out and grabbed my arm. Don't say that. His hand was strong, but so was mine. I grabbed his thumb and twisted it backwards. Turn me loose. My body and voice shook as if trapped in one of Ruth's fits. I love this simile. My body and voice shook as if trapped in one of Ruth's fits. Ladies and gentlemen, that's a beautiful simile. Highlight, underline, or circle, and give me a gist telling me what you think she means by that. Sorry, he released me and I released him. I'm sorry for your sister and your face and your broken head. He wiggled his thumb. 100 times as sorry as the hills. I moved to shut the gate in his face. He held it open. We all have scars, Isabel. I'll never talk to you again. I threw myself against the gate, shut it, and threw home the latch. Guys, that's the end of chapter 25. Now, I'm fanning y'all because a lot happened in that chapter. A lot happened in that chapter, even though it was hella short. So I want you to think about how Isabel was feeling and what she was thinking at the beginning of chapter 5. We already talked about how sad she was. And then think about the middle of the chapter. And then think about just now when she throws herself against the gate and slams it shut and then slams down the latch. That's the little thingy that hooks to lock the gate. Because your exit ticket question is going to ask you, how does Isabel change? And what imagery or figurative language does Hals Anderson use to reveal or to convey how she changes? So on that exit ticket, you're going to have to tell me two things. Number one, how does she change? And in order to talk about the change, you have to talk about how she feels and what she thinks at the beginning of the chapter, and then how she feels and what she thinks as the chapter winds up and comes to a close. And then you're going to have to discuss the kind of figurative language with a specific focus on imagery that Halls Anderson uses to show us this change in Isabel. Guys, really cool reading with you and talking about this chapter. Don't come in that class tomorrow without these gists, without these things highlighted, circled, and underlined. It's going to be very important. And I'm going to ask you what the word melancholy means. So let's go back for a second to page 159. Actually, the top of page 157, the first word of chapter 25 is melancholy. I hope you circled that and you just did the definition, because that's going to be super important moving forward. Guys, it's been great. See you tomorrow. Oh, don't forget, there's going to be a quiz.